Okay, good evening. Before I start with this material that I want to do tonight, I just want to point out something that I feel compelled to always point out because of what's going on, in the world today, but it's, provide a little perspective. It's an interesting thing and even a scary thing if you think about it, that people who we wouldn't even trust with our lives before, like at all, and to make decisions for us because we wouldn't trust their das, we wouldn't trust the way they think, all of a sudden get elected to office, become politicians, and they're making decisions that affect the direction of the world. And it's not just them, but the people around them. They come into office with personalities. It's almost like we somehow we expect them to be imbued with a certain level of wisdom that comes miraculously because they certainly don't have that wisdom on their own. They don't know enough. They don't understand or appreciate the issues. They're too affected by public opinion, that's for sure, and making decisions that really are reckless from other people's perspective, our perspective. And the Torah addresses this issue because it's a very important thing to always remember when it comes to Jewish history. Extremely important because has been the basis of redemption for some and the opposite for others. Mostly others, meaning that the Torah says V'yakam melech hadash in Parashat Shmos, the very beginning. I think it's the seventh pasuk. It's talking about Yosef's brothers who they all died, and once they died, the Medrash says that's when the gezeres, the decrees began, and the Jewish people became oppressed. And it says V'yakam melech hadash, and we spoke about this before, whether it was a new king, whether it was the same one that was there before but had a change of mind. It doesn't really make a difference to me. I mean, there is an insight in the fact that there is a difference of opinion regarding this, but in the end, it doesn't make a difference. The point is the Torah is telling you how easily things can change based upon one leader, just one leader. And the truth is, it wasn't just one leader. It was the people around Paro who compelled him to change. According to one who changed his kivun, his way of thinking, it was because of the pressure they put on him to oppress the Jewish people. He didn't want to at first. He felt a koras hatov, a sense of debt, gratitude towards Yosef and his family and his descendants. And he, believe it or not, was hard pressed to begin all this. But then once things got going, once they pressured, once they took away his executive key to the to the palace, then he changed his mind. It didn't happen right away, but he eventually changed his mind. And because of that, the whole thing unfolded. But it's all hashgacha pratis. It's all min hashamayim. Kosh Baruch Hu does it. But it didn't have to say that. There's lots of leaders in Jewish history, like Hitler, Yamach B'Zichro, and Chmeniki, and others who Roman Caesars who were anti-Semites through and through from the beginning, and they didn't need any prompting to go ahead and oppress the Jewish people and cause them to suffer. Right? Why would the Torah make such a point of taking somebody who was on our side and then turned against us? And the same thing is true by Koresh, right? The Jewish people went to Babel, the first exile. The temple was destroyed. Babylonia came, Nebuchadnezzar's army came and took the Jewish people back to Babel. And after 52 years, they were conquered in 3390 by Koresh and the Persians, and they took over the Jewish people as exiles. But they were benevolent. I mean, Koresh was benevolent. He said, uncharacteristically, right, you can go back and build your base in Mikdash. You can go back there to Israel after Nebuchadnezzar had said just the opposite, done just the opposite. And then after 2 years, he turned. He changed his mind. He said, no, you can't anymore. And he shut the door. It's all min hashamayim. That we forget that. I mean, even if we don't forget that, it's hard to get it down to the heart, from the head to the heart. That's the whole avoda. Just to know it, be so real with it that you don't act inconsistent in any way. But the Torah is making this point to tell us that you have to be careful. It doesn't make a difference. It's like you go outside. How many summer days have you gone outside and it's a clear blue sky, and you think to yourself, a gorgeous day. It's going to be like this all day long. And by 11th in the morning, there's clouds in the sky. And by 2:30, it's raining. not necessarily always in Eretz Yisrael, but other, in the wintertime for sure it could happen here. And it just changes. And we just make these decisions about how to deal with the future based upon the present as if it's always going to be that way. But after a while, you learn, you check the weather and you become experienced in this type of a thing, and you wonder, like, where is this going to go? To the point you become paranoid a little bit, but certainly suspicious that things can change very quickly. And one of the reasons why they can do that, even if it's not logical, doesn't make sense to us, is because that's what Hashem wants. At the end of the day, that's what a Kodesh Baruch Hu wants. No one lifts a finger or stubs a finger, the Gemara says, if it's not nigzar in Shemaim, if it's not first decreed in heaven. So whatever's going on down here, whatever the names, being thrown around, whatever is, acts are taking place, or decrees, or laws, or rules, or oppression that's put on us, it's all been Shemaim, it's all from a Kodesh Baruch Hu. It gets hard to see that. It's hard to be real with that, but that is the Metzias. And because of that, you have to be suspicious, because God has this plan, and it's a plan that's been in effect ever since Maaseh Bereshis, ever since the beginning of time. Nothing is off script. Nothing is, incidental. Nothing is catching God by surprise. Us, yes, but not HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's all been planned from the very beginning, and how it plays out is also part of that master plan en route to some ultimate purpose that may not be that clear to us at this point in time, except in words, except in the actual technical definition of what that purpose is, which we'll talk about hopefully a little bit as well here, B'ezras Hashem. But just have to always keep that in mind, how quickly, how easily things change, even with a single leader, with one leader who can come in on one day and sound like he's our friend and sound like he's working on our behalf. And all of a sudden, because of some type of way of thinking and pressure, and what do they know? What do they understand? They don't understand the Middle East. They don't understand who we're dealing with. They don't understand the mentalities of the people involved in the conflict. And because of that, they make terrible mistakes, drastic mistakes. But again, it's mistakes from our perspective, it's mistakes in terms of them, and they can be held accountable for them by God. But everything that's happening and unfolding is all part of the redemption process, speaking of which is what tonight's topic is basically about. It's one that we keep coming back to because there's more and more insights to understand about this, and you'll see it's actually as you do this, you get closer and closer, and it becomes more exciting and more insightful in terms of understanding the events of history, and it also helps you to rise above what's going on in the world somewhat. Now, I have this psychological thing about reading from notes, but sometimes I just find that if I don't, then I basically don't stick to the script and forget a lot of information, leave it out. So I'm going to share the information with you, because also there's some timelines here, some diagrams that will probably help a little bit with information. So I'm putting it up, B'ezras Hashem, and hopefully that will help us also. Let me just share this 1 second. Okay. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see that. Okay. So this is called Historic Revelations, and you'll see why shortly, B'ezras Hashem. Even though this session was called, when I actually named this class, this was called The Point of No Return. It has since changed to Historic Revelations because you'll see what's coming up. We'll come back to the idea of the point of no return. It's a little bit part of this, but it has become a separate point unto itself. But this is the main idea for this evening. Okay, Kabbalah teaches that the 6 millennia of history are rooted in the 6 days of creation. What does that mean? And if you look at the bottom of the footnotes, these are all the sources for what I am telling you. And it says basically that we looked at the 6 days of creation as things that happened once a long time ago, and that's all there should have been, maybe forever. And then Adam made the mistake of eating from the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra and caused exile from Gan Eden. And as a result of that, we have 6,000 years that came after as a Tosefet, meaning that we just have to go through this to get back to the Garden of Eden eventually in the future. But are they connected, other than the fact that it's the same flow of time? And it's cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect, that the effect is from a previous cause was a previous effect in going to go all the way back in time? No. The answer that we're told by Kabbalah is that everything that's happening in the course of the 6 millennia, by definition, is rooted in the 6 days of creation. What does that actually mean? It means that whatever happens in the millennium can be traced back to a respective moment during a respective day. In other words, day one is the basis for the first 1,000 years. And it actually is rooted in the 6 spheres of, Chesed through Yesod, and therefore the first sphere is Chesed. So Chesed is a particular spiritual reality, kindness, right? It's a trait of God, but it's a certain energy. It's a certain spiritual energy that dictates what's going to happen throughout the course of that one millennium, that single millennium, the first millennium. So this is what it means. And not just that, but whatever took place during the first day of creation has a similar result in the first millennium. And you should be able to trace it back. We can't, because we don't know exactly specifically what happened when. But we do know what happened on the day in general. And for example, on the first day, God made the light, then God hid the light, right? These are all events of the first day. And the second day, he divided the waters, right? The second millennium is when the flood took place, right? And it's obviously has to do with water. And the third millennium is the sphere of Tiferes, which has to do with Torah. It goes on, but the idea is the idea, meaning that you can trace back an event during a millennium back to the specific day that corresponds to it, to a specific moment. In fact, you could reverse engineer. We know what happened. For example, we know that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed in 33-38. You can translate that date into a moment during the fourth day. That would be the fourth millennium, the fourth day of creation, and maybe find something in the Chumash that happened on that day. Well, we do. We know, right? That was the day that the light of the moon was reduced. It complained to God. The two kings can't wear the same crown. So God said, fine, you go reduce yourself. And again, this is a Kabbalistic story. It's a nice little medrash. It sounds like a child story, but it's actually very deep, very profound, has to do with the hiding of the original light of creation. And basically that, but the Jewish people are compared to the moon. And the light of the Jewish people is compared to the light of the moon. That just the same way that the moon reflects the light of the sun, the Jewish people reflect the light of God through Torah. God gave us a Torah. That's the sun emanating his light to us, and then we show the world what Torah is about and what it means. And we've done that to some degree. The civility of the world today goes back in time, a large part, to Torah. And this is the idea that we can correlate what took place. The Vilna Gaon speaks about this, and he even goes so far as to say that if you understand what's going on and how this actually works, you could calculate the arrival date of Moshiach if you knew how to actually do it. Okay, that's what he says. Elsewhere, he says that you really can't calculate the date of Moshiach ben David, but Moshiach ben Yosef, that you can. But that's for a different discussion. Anyhow, so point number 2. Thus, 1,000 years corresponds to 24 hours of a day of creation, making an hour equal 46.66 years. You divide 1,000 by 24, you get 46.66. So 1 hour of creation, of a day of creation, would therefore correspond to 46.66 years. That's the timeline below here, right? We're actually looking at the 6th millennium, because that's the one that's relevant to us. 5,000 to 6,000, which in the secular accounting was 1240 to 2240, right? And then 1740, which is the Industrial Revolution, Age of Enlightenment, at that time, right? If you'll notice, that occurs actually because the Jewish day begins at night and ends, and the day is the second half. So therefore, the first 12 boxes below are dark because that's the first 12 hours of the night. Halachic hours, of course, right? Which we determine, they can be longer and shorter, and they're not fixed 60 minutes every single day. But the white boxes, those would be the daytime hours. So it actually turns out that what we would call, let's say, sunrise in the 6th millennium, which would have been sunrise actually in the 6th day, right, corresponds to 1740, which is when mankind turned a very serious corner in terms of of advancement, technological advancement. And the Zohar says that when that happens, things like that happen, that's a sign that there was light put into the world for the sake of the Jewish people to expedite redemption. And if we don't use that energy, we don't use that light, it doesn't go back to Shemayim. It gets taken by other sources and used in a different way. So the advancement of mankind scientifically, also at 5,000, 1240 was a big year too, right? And if these things, are the result of a spiritual energy that's meant for the Jewish people that ends up getting used instead by the Gentiles for their own purposes. Anyhow, so that's the idea of 12 and 12, okay, one day corresponding to 1,000 years. However, since God only created during daytime hours, and events of history occur throughout an entire millennium, 1,000 years must correspond to 12 daylight hours, making a millennium hour equal 83.33 years, right? Because if we're saying that the basis of the events of history are the acts of creation, and the Medrash tells us that God did not do any creating at nighttime. We didn't know that. We didn't, from the Chumash, it's not clear at all, right? But the Medrash tells us that God didn't do any, not that he couldn't see, not that he couldn't do it, but that's what he chose to do for whatever reason, right? He did during the daytime hours, the 12 halachic daytime hours. And since history is made up of events from the beginning of the millennium until the end of the millennium, it means that the entire 1,000 years has to correspond to the period of creating of that specific day. So it's the sixth millennium, corresponds to the sixth day of creation, and therefore has to correspond to the 12 daylight hours of the sixth day, and spread out over the course of 1,000 years. So rather than divide by 24, as we did up above, we had to divide by 12, which changes the actual length of a millennium hour, meaning the corresponding period of time, to 1 hour of a day in creation. So therefore you do that. So basically it ends up being 83.33 years. Okay. So that's the source down below here. Okay. We don't know the future, but we do know the past. If the future is based, if you want to know what the number 9 and number 10 is over here on this timeline, it's going to come up a little bit soon. Well, we'll just hang on there. We'll get to it, Bezrat Hashem. Okay. We don't know the future, but we do know the past. If the future is based on the past, we can learn something about the former from the latter. And once the Gemara tells us about the sequence of events of day 6, which is down here below, footnote number 5, where it says, Rabbi Yochanan ben Chanina said, he divides the hour up. The sixth day consisted of 12 hours. In the first hour, dust was gathered. This is all Tanakh Adam, and you look at the bold text. In the 10th hour, he sinned. In the 9th hour before that, he was actually committed a nati from the tree. And that's the 12 hours of day 6. And this over here, the numbers to show you the actual how it breaks it down in times a year. We'll get to that in a second as well, Hashem. Okay, so I lost my thread, okay. But the sequence of the events of day 6, we can project that past into our future. Thus, the 9th hour of day 6, when God commanded man not to eat from the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, corresponded to an 83.3-year period that began in 1906. Look at the graph, the numbers below, right? Hour 1, hour 2, hour 3, all the way to hour 12. If you divide that period of time, that 1,000 years by 12, so these are the numbers you get. 5,000 corresponds to 1240, 5083 rounded off the numbers, either up or down based upon the fraction. 5083 corresponds to 1323, 5167 corresponds to 1407, all the way to the 10th hour, which is 5750, 1990, and then the 12th hour ends with 6,000. Okay, so the 10th hour, during which he broke that command, began in 1990 and continues until 2073. Okay, this is extremely important. We'll see obviously why, because it's pretty obvious at this point, but we'll talk about it in 1 second. But I just want to point out that even though the 10th hour is when the sin actually took place, the 9th hour is hugely important as well, because of the fact that until the command was given, In a sense, history hadn't started. Man was created, yes, and Adam, had a wife and they even had children by that time, right? But until the commandment, and they didn't eat from the tree yet for whatever reason, but until they were commanded not to eat from it, things didn't get going. You don't have a test, until someone says to you, don't do this. If you do, this is what's going to happen, or control yourself, right? But this is basically the beginning of the story. This is very important for another reason, which we're not going to go into right now, but it has to do also with the concept of a teres yesod, which we spoke about last week somewhat. That's a little bit more complicated, but that will come hopefully back to another point in time. However, interrupting this, because if we're saying this, take stock right now, right? We're saying that as of 1990, we entered the period of the 10th hour, and the 10th hour is when Adam ate on the sixth day, and that everything happens, it happened in creation, has to happen again in history, repeats itself in some way or another. That means that the most important test of all mankind is not over. It's coming back, or has come back. We're actually living for the first time in 5,786 years since creation, well, actually earlier as of 5750, right? We entered the period of time in which Adam Arishon ate, and that means, for example, the internet. And why pick on that? Because that is really the world today in every form. And that's where we're so used to it now. Once upon a time, just go back to 1986, 1987, before we had it. I mean, the army had it, and colleges were using it since the 1970s, I believe, but we didn't have it. And you wanted to look something up, you went to the library or your own shelf if you had the book, or you did some type of research project. You had to do something physically to carry it out. The truth is, I already had CD-ROMs, which you can actually use for research too. But it was a different world. 1990, and even when it first came out, people didn't understand what it was capable of doing. But look at online shopping, look at the amount of information, medical information, and every kind of information. And now with AI and all the sophistication of searching for things and the speed at which it happens and the level, the depth of the knowledge. Yeah, even they say you have to double check things because AI is not perfect. Of course, it's not perfect, right? But it's pretty good, I have to say. And I was not I'm still scared and nervous of AI. I'm still back in George Orwell's book 1984, and I believe that those things can happen for sure, right? But in the meantime, until we see signs of it actually taking place, it's an amazing thing. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I had to turn to it to find things even just to produce this material. Things I might have known about but couldn't find. In fact, there was one source in particular. For years I was trying to track it down, and I found it in about 5 seconds just by asking AI to look for it. That's ever since 1990. Now that's a big thing, and the bigger the thing is, the more you want to find out what it could actually relate to. Well, we've been talking about this now for almost 3 decades, and from the very beginning, it became clear that this is the best example of a modern day version of an Eitz Das Tova Ra. Not an Eitz Chaim, an Eitz Das Tova Ra, tree of knowledge, good and evil. And clearly, at least from my perspective, I am 100% sure about this, that the basis of the internet, in fact, is the Eitz Das Tova Ra. Why specifically? Because there's nothing I know of that has the potential for so much good and simultaneously so much bad. Because for all the good it's doing, it's being abused incredibly by so many bad people. And that is specifically what Eitz Das Tova Ra is all about. And that's what it means. So therefore, if that's the case, it means that we're now living in the period, you have to know this. Because every day we're getting up, and for those who go to daven and those who don't go to daven, but go to work, you do your thing. We from day to day to day, we do our thing. And we have tests in the course of a day sometimes. Should I buy this? Should I not buy this? What's the hechsher like? Speaking Lashon. Yeah, we have all these tests, but the reality is the test is much bigger than that. We're actually in a position to rectify something that for thousands of years remained unrectified, or at least was only be rectified piece by piece. But we are the generation living through perhaps the most important period of history. That's not a coincidence. Mashiach has not come until now, so to speak, because this is the one, this is the period that history was waiting for thousands of years, for over 5 millennia at this point in time, and therefore we are the ones being tested all over again in our das. On what level? What do we know? How do we know it? How well do we know it? How consistent are we? It's all part of it. It's all part of the test. It's all part of the replication, what took place back at the beginning. So that lasts 83.33 years. It's a lot of time. It's almost a whole century. So how do I know that anything that's going on today is biblical, is redemption oriented? Maybe it's just at the beginning of the time. Maybe Adam ate at the last few moments of the 10th hour, not the beginning, in which case that could be decades before we get to that point. How do we know? We don't. That Torah doesn't tell us specifically what time, right? So as a result of that, we don't feel the pressure. We don't. I mean, most people don't even know this information. But even though if you do, it's like you don't. I mean, we are already basically over 30 years into that period of time now. So we've knocked off 30 years and we're only left with 53.33 years. But still, that's 5 decades of time before Mashiach could come and fix the world. We still be around. I mean, some of us are already in our 60s, and another 50 years doesn't sound likely. So what are we supposed to do? So it turns out that it's not so. That yes, it is an 83.33 year period of time that began in 1990, except that the Zohar happens to speak about something called the Chis HaMesim, the resurrection of the dead. That's the top gray box you see over here, right? And it's going to last, according to Rabbi Yehuda, 210 years, and according to Rabbi Yitzchak, 214 years. Now, when they said this, there was over 1,000 years of history left to go. So these numbers, were important, but they didn't mean a lot to them because it could easily happen well after their lifetimes. But not anymore, because we're now at a point in history, 5786, which only leaves 214 years of history to go. And that's got to include at least 214 years of Tichis HaMesim, according to Rabbi Yitzchak, and 210 according to Rabbi Yehuda. That's hugely significant. So that cuts into that 83.3 year period of time. All of a sudden, according to Rabbi Yehuda, which might be the prevalent opinion because it's now 5786 as far as we're concerned, and if the Chis HaMesim is going to begin this year, expect things to change very, very, very quickly, right? But if not, another 4 years, that's still not a lot of time. It's not 50 years, but it's still a significant amount of time that those changes can certainly take place. I mean, Kosh Baruch Hu wants it to happen. Havachu, right? As we see by Purim, all the previous holidays showed us, the future generations, how quickly a Kodesh Baruch Hu can change history on a dime, in a moment. You don't even recognize it anymore. It's been happening so far in increments, but it can happen easily in one moment, and everything just changes just like that. So that's not a problem, but that means like 4 years left. Now the point is, as the Leshem explains, that when Techis HaMesim begins and it takes place, the whole point of resurrecting the world, whoever is merits to come back in the resurrection, is to recreate man like he was prior to the Chet Eitzadas Tov Ra. Before the sin, Adam was perfect. As perfect, well, not completely yet, but he was very, very close to it. Had he not sinned and continued to go in the same direction he was created, he would have become perfect. He would have been like an angel. He would have gone to the world to come already in a very short period of time. But instead he did the chet, so he went down. Instead, it became physicalized, and as a result of that, the world changed dramatically. From kasnas or with an olive, from skin of light to skin of skin, which we have right now. That's got to change. You can't go to the world to come like this. The whole point of Techis HaMesim, as much as it's part of our history, it's really a transitional stage to prepare us for the world to come. You believe the world to come, right? The world to come is a spiritual world. There's no physicality per se, like we're used to it. Right? Whatever it means at that point to have a body is a whole different reality. more like it was before the sin of Adam Marisha, right? So this physical body, it can't stay the way it is. We have to lose all that. And that's what the Chis Mesim does. We're recreated from the ground, like Adam Marisha was first created, and we come back without any zuhama, any impurities whatsoever. We will be once again spiritual beings. Physical, yeah, but spiritual physical beings made from light. It'll be a whole different reality at that point in time. So there's no need for Mashiach in that period of time. I mean, it's not a reality. There's not the history is not one that has to be rectified. The world at that point in time is very much like the world to come. So why does it last so long? Because according to the Zohar, that when once you resurrect, you become like an angel. Your pleasure is immensible. It's immense and immeasurable, and you can't even comprehend it right now in this lifetime. But you have to merit to get to that point. So if a person was very spiritual in this lifetime, they'll resurrect at the beginning and they'll be able to enjoy it for hundreds of years until going through the world to come. For those who are very into materialism in this world, it'll take longer for them to die and then resurrect. So it's very possible that your neighbors or depends on who's more spiritual, might resurrect first. You look at your kitchen window and you'll see your neighbors flying into their house like angels because they have already died and come back and resurrected. And that will take place. The last person will be right before 6,000. So that's the Chis. So therefore, that means it leaves only a window of 4 years. This is not my personal calculation. This is not a calculation for the arrival of Mashiach. I don't know how to do that. I'm not supposed to do that. As we'll see, we can't even do that, right? But this is just plotting out, dates on a graph that are brought down by Chazal. And what does it mean? What are the implications? And that's the implication. So the 10th at the bottom, that's the 10th hour. So you see the whole 10th hour, that whole entire gray box is 83.33 years, but you see how the top box cuts into that because it's coming from the other direction, from 6,000 back 210 years, not leaving very much time. So point number 7, if all events during the 6,000 years of history are rooted in the events of the 6 days of creation, the basis of redemption is there too. It has to be. That's where it all began. You can't have redemption in the 6th millennium if there wasn't the basis of it in the 6th day, which is why Mashiach hasn't come until now. Yeah, he could have, and we're supposed to believe it, and it's possible, because technically speaking, I guess he could have come any day of creation too. But that's the way God laid out history. And that's why it is the way it is right now. So since every sin is just one of two possible outcomes, a person can either succumb to the Yetzer Hara or resist it. The moment, that's the point of no return, the moment that Adam Harishon capitulated to his, and I put his in quotation marks here because technically speaking, it wasn't his yet. At this point in time, Adam Harishon and Chava had no personal onboard Yetzer Hara. It was the snake. It was the Nachash. It was outside of them. As the Ramchal points out, I mean, we understand this, right? That as a result of the Chet, really the result of Cain being born, he was the first person born with an internal personalized Yetzer Hara, which we all got after that, right? But the moment he capitulated to really Chava, who capitulated to the snake and caused exile, was also the moment he could have rejected it and brought redemption. By definition, the same moment, right? A person, it feels, they're on the verge of doing something they shouldn't do, right? They're hungry, they're tired. You're at an airport and there's nothing else around, and there's a product that has a questionable hechsher on it that you normally would never even think about buying, but it's a moment of weakness and you're coming close to it. There's no one else around, so they can't even see you, right? And you're about to you pick it off the shelf and you're still feeling not so great. And you're walking towards the counter, and just before you put it down to pay, you say, no, it's not worth it. And you turn around and put it back, right? Then if you had actually gone through with it and then eaten it, you would have felt terrible and you would have felt there's need to do tshuva. If there's no halachic basis to have eaten that food, you would have survived another couple hours till your next destination where you could have eaten, right, or bought a fruit instead, right? You'll feel guilty. You have to start focusing on tshuva, regret and tshuva and all that. But the moment a person goes that far and then doesn't carry it out, they're miskaber, as the word, gibor, they overcome, they reject the Yetzer Hara, and they do the right thing instead, that they know is the right thing to do. They feel even stronger than they ever were before. It's not like, oh, I came so close. No, you feel, wow, I was miskaber. I overcame my Yetzer Hara, right? And that's redemption. That's what redemption feels like on a personal level. So the moment, if Adam Marishan ate from the Eitz Das Tov Ra, right, the point of no return where he couldn't fix it, he couldn't go back and undo it anymore. The reality had changed. And the Zohar talks about what that means in far more profound terms than is discussed by most people, right? The moment he got that point, that if that could result in almost 5,800 years of exile, then should have also been able to result in even more redemption. Because obviously with exile, it's got to come to an end at some point in time. History was not made for exile, so God's going to end the exile. But had he resisted, Chazal say, done the right thing, then it wouldn't have been 5,800 years of redemption. It would have been redemption forever. That would have been it. He would have fixed it. That would have been the end of the story, and we would not be having this year. At least not here. Maybe in Gan Eden. But that's what it means. That's what the idea means, that the moment for redemption had to also have been, therefore, the moment that he caused the exile. So knowing that precise moment would mean being able to calculate the final redemption. Because if you know exactly when that took place, we already know that 1 hour corresponds to 83.33 years. We know that, right? If you know at what point in the hour that he did that moment of point of no return, so then you could make a simple mathematical calculations. We'll see an for example in a second, right? And know precisely what year the Mashiach is supposed to arrive. So the moment that he had the potential to result in exile, also the potential for redemption. Hence, the gematria of Nachash, which is snake, and Mashiach are the same. Because the Nachash itself was the cause of the exile. Mashiach, of course, reverses all that and causes the redemption. The Nachash was Das Ra, and Mashiach is Das Tov, right? The good Das. They're two sides of the same coin. So, for example, if that moment that Adam ate, that the point of no return, and it wasn't actually the eating was, according to Chazal, the eating was much, a little bit later on, and that was just the net result of the initial sin that changed the world already. Adam had already transformed the world through looking at the tree, trying to understand the tree, and let's say that moment that he did that transformation occurred 25 minutes into the 10th hour of day 6, and 1 hour corresponds to 83.33 years, the 25 minutes would equal 34 years. Footnote number 11 shows you the calculation, right? That is 25 minutes times 83.33 years divided by 60 minutes is equal to 34 years. Then the 25 minutes, right? If you take that, since the 10th hour began in 1990, 34 years after that was 2024. And that would have been the year of redemption. So the fact that 2024 was not the year has not been, as far as we know right now, that Mashiach came and announced and carried out the final redemption. We can assume that Adam did not eat from the Eitz Das Tov Ra, at least for the first 25 minutes of the 10th hour. Once Mashiach finally comes and the redemption is taking place, then we will know at what moment Adam ate from the Eitz Das Tov Ra. But anyhow, it'll be more or less it would be irrelevant. I mean, you can know it; it's just part of the learning, but it wouldn't have much an impact because Mashiach's already here. Okay, but we don't know the precise moment of the sin, so we can't know the Kates Hadoris. I spoke about this, I think before Sukkot, before Rosh Hashanah. There's two types of redemptions according to the Gra. There's what's called Kates Hashanim, Kate Hadoritz, Kate Hashanim is associated with Moshiach ben Yosef. It's based, Shanim are years. It's based upon time, so therefore you can make the calculation for Moshiach ben Yosef. But Kate Hadoritz is based upon the generation. When the generation is fitting and ready for redemption, and that's something that we can't calculate. It's not based upon time, so therefore we don't know it, and we won't apparently until it becomes so obvious that even a school child, a Tinuk Shebeit Ramban, the Zohar says, will see it coming. The Zohar says that at some point in time, that the arrival of Mashiach ben David will become so obvious that even a child will be able to see it. The only thing is that you have to wonder because the Gemara says in Baba Basra that prophecy was taken away from the prophets, that we know, right? And given to Chachamim. At first it says that. But then the Gemara comes later on the second side of the daf and says it was actually given to Shotim and Tinok Shebeit Ramban, and what we call Tashbar for short. So Shotim, the problem with Shotim is that they're crazy. They're not healthy, not sane. We don't, there have in history people who made all kinds of prophecies, but how reliable are they? It's hard to know. But it says that this prophecy also comes to children. So maybe it might be specifically children learn Torah. So that could be that they will know something that adults won't. Why does it make a difference? Because the Gemara says in Shabbos, right, a discussion with Rav Papa and Abaya, and Abaya mentions that you cannot compare the tefillas of a Tinuk Shebeit Ramban, and us, smarter, wiser, bigger Talmid Chachamim than the children, but it's not the same thing. Why not? Because all of our knowledge and all of our tefillas are all tainted by chet. We have done chatoim. We have done things we shouldn't do. It affects what we think. It affects what we do. It affects how we daven, right? But they, even though they might still be doing things that are not right, but they're kids. And they're not chayiv yet in Torah mitzvahs, so therefore they don't have a verus. So therefore their hevel, their breath, which is another word for light too, by the way, right? Their hevel is untainted, and therefore it's able to penetrate to higher levels that maybe even adults can. That's why it's so important. The Gemara says that's why Yerushalayim was destroyed, because they stopped learning. The Tinuk Shebeit Ramban. That was one of the reasons why, because their hevel, their breath, their learning, what they say, has such an impact on creation. So therefore, we have to ask the question when it says that they'll see it coming, because we'll also see it coming. It's just that they can also see it because even though they're less qualified than we are, or is it the other way around? We won't see it coming, but they will, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is speaking through them. As they say, teku. We have to wait and see what happens, as things unfold. Okay. It would be a mistake, however, to think that this is just incidental. God could have made creation any way he wanted, and therefore the hiddenness of the date of the final redemption is part and parcel of the profoundest purpose of creation. It must, by definition, have to do with the revelation of Radla, also called Tzniusa, hidden. Now, one statement sounds simple, right? Just have to define the terms over here. But there's a whole sefer in the Zohar, one of the most secret and difficult to understand, is called Sifra Desnusa, which means the sphera of the hidden one, and it deals with the fundamentals of creation according to Kabbalah, the deepest of ideas. That it takes a tremendous amount of explanation, but I can summarize a little bit by saying that Radla actually stands for a couple of words. It stands for Aramaic words is Reisha Delois Yada, which means the head that is not known. Does that help at all? Probably not, right? It just helps understand what the words mean, but what head? What is it is not known, right? So that has to do with the fact that we know that God's light at the very top, the Reisha, the head, is talking about the very, 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 very top spheres, right? The original will of God to make creation. Before all of this came into existence, that was there. That was the first light that came into the world, so to speak, way before we, talk about, how things happened before you were even a glint in your parents' eyes. We were just, God had us in mind from the very beginning, but we were a long way off from being created, This light was so intense, so powerful, that even the levels below it can't relate to it. They can't know it, right? Arch Ampin, which is one of the highest levels in the spheres. It doesn't recognize it. These are things that have to be understood in the proper context, but it's such a high, it's hidden. However, it has to be revealed. The whole point of creation from the very beginning has been for the sake of revealing this light. Now, it's not going to be revealed so much in our lifetime or even before 6,000. The real revelation of this light will take place further on in the world to come. And the further we go, the more that light will be revealed. And though it sounds like a far way off, and it is a far way off, right? And it seems so irrelevant to us because this is the world we're living in. This world, as the mission of Pirkei Avos says, this world's just a corridor to that world. The real world coming up is from 6,000 onward. That's where the real action takes place, so to speak, the real connection to God. We're just working on it right now to get there, to do whatever we can to earn the right to be there and to prepare ourselves for what's coming up. But that's the point of creation. That light is hidden and it's meant to be revealed. However, even though it's mostly revealed in the future and the ecstasy, the pleasure, that's the pleasure of the world to come. Don't even try to think about it. There's nothing comparable. Shabbos is 1/60th, we're saying, but 1/60th means it's batal. It's like there, but you can't really detect it because it's so minute compared to what's going on around you. Likewise, this world's way too distracting, way too physical. Maybe already, Moshiach, the Chis Mesim especially, will have a better idea because we'll already be so spiritual. But still, until we get to the world to come and go deeper and deeper into the world to come, we're not going to know what that light means. Yet that's the whole purpose of creation. It's all just to get to there, right? And that light has to be revealed. But we also know that when Mashiach comes and the redemption begins, we're living in Yemos Mashiach, the prophet has said, on that day, God will be king over the entire world. He will be one, his name will be one. So that's already part of the revelation of this light. That's what Yemos Mashiach is all about. The world will be full of Deya, knowledge, the prophets talk about. These are things to contemplate. These are not just things to read and pack away somewhere in the back of your mind. These are things to think about. This is where it's at. Buying new clothes, buying a new car, living in a house, all the things we do in this world. It's like so secondary to that. And the people that are real with that, they live with that reality. They're not really part of this world so much because they don't need it. They're investing like the person who's saving to buy a house. He really wants that house. He sacrifices a lot of pleasures along the way. He doesn't get with his buddies, drinking, he doesn't waste his money on things that other people might think, that's just the fun of life because he's got a bigger goal, right? So that's true of this as well, right? And that light, by definition, is going to become revealed a lot more the moment that the date of Mashiach's arrival becomes known to everybody, because it's not just a date. It's not just a date. The same way, when someone says to you, there's going to be an exam when this is all over, or we're going to be flying someplace, the first when, why must I know when? Because everything revolves around that. When changes everything. It's not just a date, but things have to happen by that date. And why that date specifically? Why not this date instead? What's the meaning behind all that? How much more so when it comes to something like this? So to actually know the date of Mashiach's arrival, by definition, also means to reveal this light. There's a problem, right? The revelation of one is the revelation of the other, explaining why both must be hidden until it is time to reveal them. The final redemption is not merely the end of our period of history and passage to the next. Geula is the unveiling of the reality of God to the world. As it says, God will be king over the entire world. On that day, God will be one and his name one. We say every day in Aleinu, in case you didn't notice, right? Therefore, and this is important, to prematurely reveal the date of Mashiach's arrival would be to prematurely reveal the light of Radha to the world, and consequently, prematurely end free will. Because once this light comes into the world, evil is history. There's no possibility anymore of doing anything but good. That kills free will. The knowledge of the date would do this since it was designated to maximize the revelation. So only God knows when free will is meant to end. Therefore, only God can know, and when the time is perfect, reveal the moment of Mashiach's arrival, either through the events of history or prophecy. However, just as Radla is being revealed over history, so is the date of Mashiach's arrival. Tikkun, which facilitates the revelation of Radla, takes place over all of history, reaching completion on the final day. But over time, increasingly more knowledge and insights are discovered and revealed that inch the world closer to the final revelation. It's been going on for thousands of years. It's not just an all or nothing thing. On the contrary, it may not be recognizable to us all the time, but every single thing, especially the big things, but every single thing that goes on in history, by definition, is feeding into this. And at some point in time, it'll become clear retroactively. When we finally get to the final that final moment in time, and Mashiach comes, and we can understand what it meant, we'll go back and see how all of that was part of it, and then we'll wonder, how did we miss it? There's also the idea of drosh the kabel schar, right? Pursuing the date of Mashiach's arrival because of what it means for the world is like answering the question God asked Adam, Ayeka. Then man hid from God, but pursuing the drosh redemption is like pursuing God. There is schar, reward for this. What do I mean by this? The Gemara asks the question. The Gemara says, talking specifically about two things, but one is the Ben Sura Mora. In Parashat Kiseitse, the Torah speaks about a Ben Soramor, a rebellious child. And it sounds simple enough. He rebels, he does certain things, take him. The Beis Din says kill him, right? Because he's going to go off on a tangent and ruin his life. So we take him while he's still merit worthy, right? And, why shouldn't it be able to be carried out? Especially today, it would be, terrible, right? But the Gemara says no. The Gemara says no. There's certain qualifications. First of all, the father and mother have the same type of voice, sound the same, right? That doesn't happen very often, right? And some say it just means they agree with each other, like psychologists say we're supposed to today, but that's not the way. That's not the way the Gemara is mashma, and other things too that really are physical impossibilities. And the Gemara in the end says that Ben Sora Mora never was, never will be. And that was the mitzvah was given, but it can never be carried out. Also, Iri Nidachas, also they talk about as well. Although the Gemara does say that there was a Ben Sura Mora, that's according to the opinion that it can't be carried out. So the Gemara asks the question, according to the opinion, it says it can't be carried out, so why put in the Torah? What's it there for? All the mitzvahs we can normally do, and we're supposed to do. So the Gemara answers back by saying, Drosh for l'chabas, just to learn it, just to elucidate it, just to get the messages that we can out of it, right? And you get rewarded for that. Even if you can't actually carry out the mitzvah, the fact that you're learning it and being involved with it, the fact that you cannot figure out the date of Mashiach, the fact that you want to and you're trying to, and using all the resources that are available to you and coming up with insights that bring you closer to it, is enough to give you a reward. That's reason enough, right? It also says in Pirkei Avos, you are not responsible to finish the work, but neither are you at liberty to neglect it. So the fact that you can't complete something doesn't mean you shouldn't be involved in it if it's a worthy cause. It's a mitzvah to do. And it also says, and according to the pain is the reward, which means that the more effort you put into it, the more you're going to be rewarded for it. When heaven sees a person legitimately work hard at anticipating redemption, a mitzvah in its own right, the Gemara says, they help them. Heaven helps them. Perhaps even to know it before everyone else. We don't know what the rewards are. We don't know where it will lead. But one thing is for certain, to be involved in the topic, just like this section itself, be involved in the topic to learn it and to show Kosh Baruch Hu how much we want to bring it is chashuv to Hashem. It's endearing. Hashem said to Adam, Ayek, where are you? Adam ate, he heard God coming, and he hid. He went the other direction. God's coming, he ran the other direction. To go and pursue this information, to be involved in it, is like saying, no, I'm not hiding, I'm pursuing. I'm going after God because I know that once the Gula comes, He will reveal himself to the whole world. No fakers, no doubts, no heresy, no denying his reality. I cannot wait for that time. That's just the opposite. That's the tikkun for Yeka. We should merit to get to such a level, B'ezras Hashem, and have Hashem open our eyes and show us His wonders. One of which, God willing, will be the actual arrival of Mashiach ben David ben Ravi Minu. Amen. Have a good Shabbos.